What is globalization? This course is called Literature and Globalization, but for 3 units, I've gotten away with not really explaining what globalization is. So what is globalization? Globalization, simply put, is the process of becoming more global and less local. We can say that globalization is the increasing of connection and interdependence between different parts of the world, different countries in the world, different nation states in the world. As such, it is a process that has been happening since the beginning of human history, as I mentioned earlier, but it has been happening at different paces, at different speed, and to a different extent than it is happening over the last 50 years. Often when people talk about globalization, they mean a process from the second part of the 20th century, when the extent of connection increased manifold compared to earlier moments in history. So this was true after the Second World War, but was held back by the rivalry between the communist countries led by the USSR and Western capitalist countries led by the USA. In the 1970s, China, which is a communist country, opened up to the West. And in the late 1980s, communism in Europe started to fall apart. And the nations that were once part of the communist bloc turned to capitalism and democracy. And this was symbolized by the fall of the Berlin Wall. These events created an opportunity for creating a community that seems to encompass the whole globe. And after the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was a lot of talk of globalization and a globalized era. A lot of the time, what people mean when they speak of globalization on television or in the newspaper or even in academic contexts is the globalization of finance, commerce, and industry. This is a huge topic, and I'll give you just a small taste of it. If you look around your home now, you see a lot of products. Most of them were produced very far away from where you are sitting right now. A t-shirt or a dress you might be wearing was probably made in China, but it was made from cotton grown in the USA or India. Your computer was made in China with components from all over Asia, but designed in the US or Japan. Even products produced in Israel will have components and raw materials produced elsewhere. For instance, even if you make your own bread at home in the oven that you used was probably made maybe in Germany, but and the wheat you're making the bread with was grown not in Israel, but in Turkey or Russia. We are so used to consume products that come from all over the world that we don't even notice it anymore. But this is not the natural situation. It's not obvious. It's not something that was common for most of human history. For most of human history, people mostly used things they made themselves or things made by people they knew locally. Maybe they had one item from far away, but mostly it was local. Even after industrialization in the 19th century, much of the production, at least in the West, was for fairly local consumption. You made things in England for English people and for the colonies, but that's a story from the other unit. Beyond globalized production, we have global finances, everything that has to do with money, banking, insurance, investing, the stock market. Banks and other international corporations have investments all over the world, not just in the state they are based in. In the past, much of the economy was framed within, held within small regions or within nation states. You talked about the economic situation of France or the economic situation of Germany. But today, money flows between regions and countries and states, and the states are not able to control the flow of money and investments and different financial issues. So an economic event in one country affects the whole world sometimes, especially if it's one of the bigger countries. Multinational corporations are often more powerful than individual small states and cannot be controlled by the politicians in that state. The politicians being the people who are supposed to represent the citizens and their interests. To exaggerate a little bit, with enough money and the power that comes with money, you can basically be beyond the reach of any national law. If you don't like the law in one country, you simply move your investment to other countries. At the same time, politics and law have also become more global. Many countries decided to join together in regional and other organizations. Thus, they give up some of their independence and some of the power of the nation state in order to be part of an international power base, the most important of which is probably the many countries that joined together in the European Union. There, for instance, countries cannot decide anymore that they will not allow other citizens from Europe to live within their borders. So if you're Greek, you can live wherever you want in the European Union. Before the European Union existed, Germany or France could decide that they don't want to let you in. The European Union is regional, it's only for Europe, but some of their organizations span the whole globe, like the United Nations, where most of the nation states of the world are members. While the United Nations cannot make any country do what it wants, it can exert significant pressure, sometimes backed up by military power. The International Court of Justice in The Hague, for instance, takes as its right to investigate and judge violation of international law, usually connected with war criminals, things like that. But it's very important that this is a new thing in our world. They take a power, deciding who's innocent and who's guilty, away from the nation state and make it more global. So you can be judged in the Netherlands, in The Hague, for crimes committed anywhere in the world, as long as it comes under international law. We can also talk about globalized or hybrid cultures. There are two sides to this coin. Culture from all over the world is available all over the world, wherever you are. If you want to watch an Indian movie or a Turkish TV show, you can do so very easily today. If you want to read a poem from Nigeria or a novel from New Zealand, you can. If you want to have a Thai or Italian meal, you can do so too, though it's, in the case of the meals, it's not exactly the same as actually having a good Italian or Thai meal in those respective countries. Culture from all over the world is available more than ever, and indeed many people are open to it. So the global culture, or each person's individual culture, becomes much more varied and much more international and much more varied and global. The other side of the coin is there's a trend of Americanization of all the culture of the world, anywhere that's open to American culture. So that Turkish television series you're watching or the Indian movie show some unique characteristics of their own culture for sure, right? Indian Bollywood movie is not the same as a Hollywood movie, but they are also deeply influenced by Hollywood as well. K-pop, the popular music from Korea, that I know a lot of my students like, is unique in many ways. It's special to Korea. It has its own characteristics, but anyone can hear that it also has a huge debt to American pop music and American hip hop music in the way it sounds and in the way the singers and groups look and all the organization around it. It's deeply influenced by Western music and by American pop culture. So global culture is more diverse than ever in a way, right? You can watch a movie from Iran or from New Zealand, but sometimes it feels like it is all kind of copy of American culture. So it seems like at the same time that we can enjoy all the cultures of the world, all the cultures of the world are becoming more and more like American culture. So I briefly discussed industrial, financial, political, and cultural aspects of globalization. These are the three I wanted to talk about today because I will not focus on them so much for the rest of the semester. And there are two other aspects I'll mention quickly. One is global movement of people, both as immigrants and as tourists. This will be the next 3 units of our course. And the second one is that the global reach of information technology, information moving around, especially through the internet. That will be the subject of the 2 final units of the course. Now that you have some idea of what the term globalization expresses, the next video will look at some of the benefits and drawbacks of globalization.